The sound of breaking bone echoed through the garage like a dry branch snapping. My head was thrown back so hard that I hit the concrete wall behind me. Warm blood ran down my face as Marcus, my cousin, stood in front of me with his fists still clenched, breathing heavily. "I told you not to touch my things," he yelled, his eyes bloodshot with rage. "Now you've learned your lesson." I held my nose with both hands, feeling the cartilage completely dislocated. The pain was unbearable, throbbing through my skull like hammer blows. Tears streamed involuntarily from my eyes as I tried to breathe through my mouth. "Dad!" I yelled toward the house, my voice coming out muffled and distorted. "Marcus broke my nose. Call an ambulance." The back door opened and my father appeared, still holding the TV remote. He looked at me covered in blood, then at Marcus, who still looked unfriendly, and then, he laughed. He laughed loudly, shaking his head as if he had witnessed a child's prank. "Oh, Levi, stop the drama," my father said, waving his hand casually. "Boys will be boys, you know how it is. Don't call the police or anything like that, it'll ruin Marcus's life. He's trying to get into college." My name is Levi, I'm 22 years old, and at that moment I felt like the world had turned upside down. Not just because of the physical pain that cut through my face like razor blades, but because of the devastating realization that my own father was prioritizing my attacker's future over my safety. Marcus smiled with satisfaction, knowing he was protected. He wiped his fists on his t-shirt and walked calmly to the front door, passing my father as if nothing had happened. "Go wash your face and stop crying," my father continued, shrugging. "It's just a broken nose, it's not the end of the world. And before you do anything stupid, remember that Marcus lives here because his parents went through a difficult situation. He's practically my son too." I stood there, blood dripping onto the garage floor, processing what I had just heard. My cousin had just brutally assaulted me because I borrowed a screwdriver from his toolbox to fix my bike. And my father was more concerned with protecting Marcus's college future than taking me to the hospital. But while they thought I was broken and humiliated, something very different was happening inside me. A calculating coldness I didn't know I possessed began to take shape. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow how a simple assault would become the catalyst for a revelation that would change our family forever. Because what none of them knew was that I had kept much more than just tools in my bedroom drawer. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the emergency room of the municipal hospital, still wearing my blood-stained t-shirt, waiting to be seen. I hadn't called an ambulance as my father had sarcastically suggested. I had driven there alone, with a towel pressed against my face and my vision blurred by involuntary tears. The nurse who attended to me asked the usual questions. "How did it happen? Who did this? Do we need to call the police?" "It was an accident," I lied, staring at the floor. "I hit my face on a door." She looked at me with that expression health professionals develop when they know you're lying but can't force the truth out of you. She just shook her head and continued writing in the chart. While I waited for the x-rays, I thought about Marcus. My 25-year-old cousin had been living with us for almost 2 years, ever since Uncle Robert lost his job at the factory and Aunt Linda was diagnosed with cancer. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement had become permanent, with Marcus occupying the guest room as if he were the rightful heir to the house. Marcus had always been trouble. As a child, he would break my toys on purpose during family gatherings. As a teenager, he spread rumors about me at school, saying that I still wet the bed at 15. When he turned 18, he was arrested for drunk driving, but my father posted bail and hired an expensive lawyer to make the problems go away. "Family takes care of family," my father always said, but that protection never extended to me. Now, living in our house, Marcus had become even more audacious. He ate my food from the refrigerator, borrowed my car without asking, and brought girlfriends to sleep in the room next to mine. When I complained to my father about the noise during an important college exam, he laughed and said, "Oh, Levi, you're just jealous because you can't get a girlfriend." The doctor confirmed what I already knew, a simple fracture of the nasal bone, without severe displacement. I wouldn't need surgery, but it would take weeks to heal completely. He prescribed painkillers and gave me a list of post-trauma care instructions. "Are you sure you don't want to file a police report?" he asked, carefully examining my face. "This type of injury rarely happens accidentally." I shook my head. Not yet. Not until I had a better plan. Back home, I found Marcus watching television in the living room, his dirty feet propped up on the coffee table my mother had bought before she died. He glanced at my bandaged nose and smiled smugly. "Did you learn your lesson?" he asked, chewing on a sandwich made with the ingredients I had bought at the grocery store. My father was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. When he saw me, he waved casually. "How's your nose, son? Did the doctor say anything important?" "It's broken," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "It'll take a few weeks to heal." "Oh well, these things happen," he said, stirring the pasta sauce. "Marcus told me you were play fighting, and things got out of hand. Boys will be boys, right?" I glanced at Marcus, who was now smiling openly, knowing he had created his own version of the facts. A version my father would gladly accept because it was more convenient than facing reality. At that moment, something crystallized in my mind. It wasn't just about the broken nose. It was about years of preferential treatment, years of excuses, years of being the least favorite son in a house that was supposed to be mine too. Marcus didn't know it, but I wasn't the helpless kid he used to bully anymore. During my 3 years at university, studying computer science and law as a minor, I had learned a few valuable things. Mainly about how to document evidence, how to research legal histories, and how digital systems work. Most importantly, Marcus didn't know about the locked drawer in my room, where I kept not only important documents, but also a small digital recorder that I had used to record several of the humiliating conversations I had had with my father over the years. Conversations where he made it very clear who his favorite in the family was. Including today's conversation, when he clearly said he didn't want me to call the police because it would ruin Marcus's life. As I watched my cousin celebrate his victory and my father continue cooking as if everything was normal, I smiled to myself. They thought I was weak. They thought I would accept this as I had accepted so many other humiliations. But what they didn't know was that, in a few hours, I would begin implementing something I had been planning for months, a way to expose exactly who Marcus really was, using tools he never knew I possessed. The real question wasn't whether he would pay for what he did. The question was how long it would take for the whole truth about our dysfunctional family to come out. In the days following the incident, Marcus became an even more intoxicating version of himself. It was as if breaking my nose had unleashed something primitive inside him, a thirst for domination I had never seen so explicitly. On Monday morning, I woke up to loud music coming from his room at 5:30 a.m. When I went to complain, I found the door open and Marcus working out shirtless, sweating and screaming along with an aggressive rap playlist. "Sorry, cousin," he said, without stopping his push-ups. "I'm getting ready for the police academy physical. Gotta be in shape to protect and serve, you know." The irony was devastating. The man who had brutally assaulted me was applying to be a cop. And my father, who came down the stairs at that moment, just smiled proudly. "What dedication, Marcus. I'll make you an extra strong cup of coffee." When I tried to mention that the music was keeping me awake, especially considering that I was still taking painkillers for my nose, my father rolled his eyes. "Levi, you need to stop being so sensitive. A real man doesn't complain about a little noise." On Tuesday, Marcus brought 3 friends over to watch the football game in our living room. When I got home from work, they were sprawled out on the couch, drinking my beer from the fridge and eating the pizza I had ordered for dinner. The smell of marijuana hung in the air. "Hey, Levi," Marcus shouted when he saw me. "Your friends wanted to meet the guy who fell in the garage and broke his nose." His friends laughed loudly, clearly knowing the real version of events. One of them, a skinny guy with tattoos on his neck, looked me up and down. "Man, you're a lot smaller than I imagined. Marcus said you guys got into a fight, but," he paused dramatically, "it doesn't look like a fair fight, does it?" Another friend added, "Yeah, Marcus said you tried to hit him first but slipped and hit your face on the counter. That's some bad luck, huh?" I felt my face burn. Not just from the humiliation, but from the knowledge that Marcus was spreading a completely different version of the facts. A version where I was the incompetent aggressor who got hurt trying to attack him. My dad walked into the room at that moment with a tray of appetizers. "Guys, make yourselves at home. It's always nice to have the house full of young energy." Later that night, after his friends had left, Marcus cornered me in the kitchen while I was trying to wash the dishes they had dirted. "You know, Levi," he said, leaning against the counter next to me, "my friends were worried about you. They thought you seemed kind of unstable. Like you might try something stupid again." I kept my focus on the pots, but I felt my jaw tighten. I told them not to worry, that you'd learned your lesson. But now I'm thinking, maybe it's better if you stay away from me for a while. For your own safety, you know. It was a threat disguised as advice. Marcus was marking his territory, making it clear that the house was more his than mine. On Wednesday, the situation escalated to a level I hadn't expected. I came home from work and found that the lock on my bedroom door had been changed. When I tried my key, it didn't work. Marcus! I shouted, running down the stairs. Why did you change the lock on my door? He was in the living room watching television, eating a tub of ice cream I had bought over the weekend. Oh, that, he said casually, without taking his eyes off the screen. Your father thought it was best. Some of your things have been going missing, and he thought maybe you were hiding something dangerous in there. Drugs, I don't know. What things have been missing? What drugs? That's ridiculous. My father appeared in the hallway, holding a small bottle of pills. Levi, we found this under your bed. They're prescription painkillers, but you have far more than you should have for one person. I recognized the bottle immediately. It was the medicine the doctor had prescribed for my sore nose. But something was wrong. The label was partially removed, and the bottle was full of pills that weren't the same ones I was taking. Dad, these aren't my pills. I have my medicine with me. Levi, we found them under your bed. Whose else would they be? Marcus smiled at the television, as if he were watching a particularly entertaining program. At that moment, something clicked in my mind. Marcus wasn't just physically intimidating me. He was systematically undermining my credibility, planting evidence, creating narratives where I was the problem in the family. I want my key back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. When you prove you're not using drugs, we'll talk, my father replied. Until then, you can sleep on the couch in the living room or in the guest room downstairs. The guest room in the basement. Damp, windowless, with an old bed that creaked with every movement. The place my father used to send me when I wasn't behaving during my teenage years. That night, lying in the dark basement, I heard footsteps upstairs. Low laughter. Whispered conversations. They were discussing something about me, planning their next move. That's when it all crystallized in my mind. Marcus wasn't simply taking advantage of my father's protection. He was orchestrating a systematic campaign to isolate me, discredit me, and eventually drive me out of my own home. His every move was calculated to appear reasonable in my father's eyes, while rendering me increasingly defenseless. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was passive by nature, that I would accept anything he did as long as there was no direct physical confrontation. What he didn't know was that during my years at university, I had worked part-time at the Patterson family law firm, the most respected lawyers in town. Not just filing documents, but learning about family law, property, and legal evidence. Marcus also didn't know that before he changed the lock on my bedroom door, I had removed everything of real importance, including the documents proving that the house was registered in my late grandfather's name, with a specific clause ensuring that it would pass to me when I turned 25. A clause my father had apparently forgotten to mention when he invited Marcus to live with us permanently. While they slept upstairs, planning how to humiliate me the next day, I was in the basement making discreet phone calls to people Marcus would never suspect I knew. The first call was to Dr. Helen Patterson, who still remembered me fondly and had connections throughout the county. The second was to the private investigator who had helped our family years ago when we suspected my Uncle Robert was embezzling money from my grandmother's estate. Marcus wanted games? He would get games. But this time, I would be calling the shots. And when I was done, he would find out that breaking my nose was the least of his problems. The first call I made from the basement was to Dr. Helen Patterson at 6 o'clock on Thursday morning. She answered on the third ring, her precise voice reminding me of the days when I organized files in her office. Levi? What a surprise. How are you, dear? Dr. Patterson, I need urgent legal advice. It's about real estate and inheritance rights. There was a pause. Helen had been the family lawyer when my grandfather died, and I knew she remembered the specific details of the will. Oh, I see. Your father finally found the lost documents. The irony in her voice told me everything I needed to know. My father hadn't lost any documents. He had hidden them on purpose. Not exactly. I need to know what my legal rights are regarding the property. And I need to document an assault. Levi, Can you come to my office this afternoon? Bring any medical documentation you have. The second call was to Danny Morrison, the private investigator who had worked with us years ago. Danny was discreet, efficient, and had connections in every department in the city. Danny, I need a favor. It's about Marcus Hartley, my cousin. I need to know everything about him. Criminal history, financial, academic, anything you can find. Marcus Hartley, that name sounds familiar. Isn't he the one who caused that car accident a few years ago? The one his father covered up. That's the one. Levi, if it's what I think it is, there's a lot more dirt on this kid. Give me 48 hours. All the while, Marcus continued to live like he owned the place. On Thursday night, he brought home a new girlfriend, a young woman who appeared to be 19, whom he had met on a dating app. They were noisy until 3 in the morning, and when I complained at breakfast, my father rolled his eyes. Levi, you're just jealous because you can't get anyone. Marcus is in the prime of his life. Dad, the girl looked 19. Marcus is 25. So what? They're adults. But that information gave me an idea. I started paying attention to Marcus's patterns. Always very young girlfriends. Always stories about how he was misunderstood by women his own age. Always bragging about how he could impress inexperienced girls. On Friday, I went to meet with Dr. Patterson. Her office was exactly as I remembered it. Mahogany bookcases filled with legal codes, diplomas on the walls, a commanding desk where justice was served with surgical precision. Levi, let me be blunt, she said, examining the medical documents I had brought with me. You have a solid case for assault. But tell me, what is your real goal here? I want Marcus out of my house. And I want my father held accountable for what he did. She smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind of smile lawyers give when they see a winning strategy. Your grandfather's will was very clear. The property passes to you when you turn 25, or immediately if you can prove that you are being physically threatened in the residence. Your father had temporary guardianship, but he never had legal possession. 25. I'd be 23 in 2 months. And if I proved the assault? With medical documentation and maybe a recording of your father's refusal to call the police, the property would be transferred immediately. I have the recording. Her eyes lit up. Then you have a decision to make, Levi. Do you just want the house, or do you want complete justice? What do you mean by complete justice? Danny called me last night. Your cousin's record is impressive. 3 assault charges that were dropped, 2 DUI cases that disappeared from the records, and a pattern of relationships with minors that borders on criminal. My blood ran cold. Underage. I can't prove anything, but Danny found records of several reports to social services that were filed away. Always girls between 16 and 18. Always with similar stories about coercion. At that moment, I thought of the 19-year-old girl Marcus had brought home. How many others had there been before her? If you're enjoying watching justice being served step by step, subscribe to the channel to see how small clues turn into devastating evidence, I muttered to myself as I processed the information. Dr. Patterson, I want to do this right. Completely legal, completely documented. Then we'll need more than just your word. We'll need Marcus to incriminate himself. She handed me a small device that looked like a cell phone charger. High-quality digital recorder. Completely legal if used in your own home. I need you to document not only the assaults, but any conversation that reveals his pattern of behavior. That night, I returned home with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Marcus was in the living room watching television, eating pizza he had ordered with my credit card, yet another violation I would now meticulously document. Hey cousin, he said without taking his eyes off the screen. I hear you've been asking some questions around. Be careful not to mess with things you don't understand. The threat was clear, but this time I was prepared. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus. He turned to look at me, a cruel smile on his face. Your father told me you've been making some suspicious phone calls. He said you might be planning something stupid. He's thinking about having you committed to a place where you can calm down. Involuntary psychiatric commitment. It was their final move to keep me quiet. But Marcus had made a fatal mistake. He had revealed that they were monitoring my calls, which meant they were worried. And worried people make mistakes. Especially when they don't know that every word they say is being recorded. That night, lying in the basement, I turned on the tape recorder and began making detailed notes of every incident, every conversation, every pattern of behavior I had observed. Marcus thought he had me cornered. My father thought he could silence me with threats of institutionalization. What neither of them realized was that by trying to isolate me completely, they had created the perfect conditions for their own destruction. In 72 hours, when I had completed the necessary paperwork, the only person being taken away from that house would be Marcus. And this time, there would be no expensive lawyer or family favors to save him. The first domino fell on a Monday at 7 in the morning, when Marcus received a call from the police academy. "Mr. Hartley? This is Sergeant Williams from the admissions department. Unfortunately, we have to cancel your participation in the training program." I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard his tone change dramatically. "Cancel? Why? I passed all the tests." "We've received information about your background that needs to be investigated further. We recommend that you seek legal counsel." Marcus slammed down the phone, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not the usual controlled anger, but pure panic. "What the fuck was that?" he muttered, quickly dialing another number. While he was on the phone trying to figure out what had happened, my dad came downstairs in his bathrobe. "What's going on here? Marcus, why are you yelling so early in the morning?" "Someone sabotaged my application to the academy," Marcus said, running his hand through his hair nervously. "They said they received information about my background." "What information?" "I don't have anything in my background." My father immediately looked at me suspiciously. "Levi, did you do something?" I kept my expression neutral as I drank my coffee. "Did what, Dad?" "I don't have access to anything related to the police academy." But Marcus wasn't convinced. Over the next few days, he watched me constantly, looking for signs that I was up to something. What he didn't realize was that the machine was already in motion, and every attempt he made to find out what was going on only sped up the process. On Wednesday, the second domino fell. Danny Morrison showed up at our door at 2 in the afternoon when I was home alone. Marcus had gone out to take care of some business, and my dad was at work. "Levi, I brought what you asked for," Danny said, handing me a thick envelope. "And man, you were right. This Marcus guy is a ticking time bomb." I opened the envelope and found photographs, legal documents, and archived police reports. Marcus's record was even worse than I had imagined. 3 counts of domestic violence against underage ex-girlfriends, Danny explained. All covered up by his father through out-of-court settlements. 1 count of witness intimidation. And look at this. He pointed to a specific document. Marcus was expelled from 2 universities for falsifying academic documents. And there's more. He owes $17,000 in student loans that he claimed to have paid off on all his job applications. $17,000? I repeated, processing the information. And there's something interesting here. Remember the 19-year-old girlfriend he brought over last week? Emma Rodriguez. I nodded. She filed a police report last month accusing someone of sexual threats and coercion. The assailant's name was omitted from the public report, but... Danny smiled. "Let's just say I have contacts in the department who confirmed some details." At that moment, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. Marcus was coming home. "Danny, thanks. Can you go out the back door?" "Sure." "Levi, be careful. With that history, Marcus is capable of anything when he feels cornered." 5 minutes later, Marcus walked into the room where I was sitting, pretending to read a book. "Who was that guy who just left our house?" he asked, his voice heavy with suspicion. "What guy?" "Don't lie to me, Levi." "I saw a man leaving through the back door when I pulled up." "Oh, that must have been the internet technician. Dad asked someone to check the Wi-Fi signal." Marcus watched me for a long moment, clearly not believing my story. "Levi, if you're up to something." "Marcus," I interrupted, closing the book and looking at him directly for the first time in weeks. "You broke my nose." My own father laughed and told me not to call the police because it would ruin his life. "Why the hell would I waste my time doing something to you?" The logic of my response caught him off guard. After all, from his perspective, I was the passive victim I had always been. But on Thursday morning, the third domino exploded like a bomb. Marcus got a call from Emma Rodriguez. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but it was enough. Emma, what are you talking about? What investigation? I never threatened you. Pause. What do you mean you gave my name to the police? Emma, you can't do that. Longer pause. No, don't hang up. Emma. Marcus threw the phone on the couch and started pacing back and forth in the living room, clearly panicked. That's when my dad came home from work and found Marcus in this state. Son, what happened now? Dad, something is very wrong. First the police academy rejected me for no reason. Now an ex-girlfriend is saying she's going to report me for threats I never made. Someone is orchestrating this. My father looked at me again. Levi, where were you today? Working, Dad. I can show you my time card if you want. That doesn't prove anything, Marcus exploded. He could have hired someone. Dad, Levi is trying to destroy me. That's when I decided it was time to show my cards. Marcus, I said calmly, do you want me to show you exactly what I did? The silence in the room was absolute. I documented everything. The assault, the conversation where my father told me not to call the police, his subsequent threats, his attempts to plant drugs in my room. I took the small digital recorder out of my pocket. 3 weeks of recordings. Your own voice admitting that you broke my nose. Your own voice threatening me with more violence. Marcus turned white. You'll also want to know that Emma Rodriguez didn't come to me. She went to the police on her own, but when they looked into her background, they found an interesting pattern of behavior associated with you. I paused, savoring the moment. And what about the police academy? They have a zero-tolerance policy for candidates with a history of domestic violence. Especially when there's medical documentation proving assault. Marcus tried to move toward me, but my father held him back. And there's one more thing you both need to know, I continued, my voice growing stronger. This house doesn't belong to you, Dad. It never has. Grandpa's will was very clear. The property automatically passes to me if I prove that I'm being physically threatened in the residence. I pulled out the legal documents Dr. Patterson had prepared. According to state property law, with the medical documentation of the assault and the recordings of the subsequent threats, the transfer of ownership was approved this morning. Marcus and my father looked at me as if I had grown a second head. You have 72 hours to get out of my house. Marcus finally exploded. You manipulative little worm. You set this up. You. I defended myself, I interrupted. And if you try to touch me again, I'll call the police immediately. This time, my father won't be able to stop me. That's when the house phone rang. My father answered, still in shock. Hello? Yes, he lives here. No, you have the right number. He hung up and looked at Marcus with a look of growing horror. Marcus, that was the police. They want you to come down to the station tomorrow to answer some questions about Emma Rodriguez. And about 2 other girls who have also filed complaints. The protective empire Marcus had built through my father's manipulation crumbled completely in that moment. And as he processed the magnitude of what was happening, I smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. The truth is, you never just broke my nose, Marcus. You broke your own life. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my house, now truly my home, eating breakfast when I got the call I'd been waiting for. Levi? This is Dr. Patterson. I have news about Marcus. Her voice carried that professional satisfaction lawyers develop when justice finally prevails. The jury decided today. Marcus was convicted on 3 counts of assault, 2 counts of sexual coercion, and 1 count of document fraud. 5 years in prison, no parole for the first 2 years. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I felt no vengeful joy, just a sense of closure I hadn't experienced in years. What about the other girls? Emma Rodriguez was instrumental in the trial. Her testimony encouraged 2 other victims to come forward. Marcus' pattern of behavior became so clear that the prosecutor was able to add a charge of serial sexual predator. Marcus will not intimidate anyone else. After I hung up, I walked through the renovated house. The transformation had been complete, both physical and emotional. Where once there had been suffocating tension and constant fear, there was now genuine peace and clear purpose. Marcus's room had been turned into a library with comfortable armchairs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The space where he had stored his threats and arrogance now housed law books, stories of overcoming adversity, and advocacy manuals for victims. The damp basement where I had been forced to sleep during those humiliating weeks had been completely remodeled as my law office. Yes, I had resumed my law studies with a specialization in domestic violence victim rights. Danny Morrison stopped by for coffee a few weeks after the conviction. He had become not only my private investigator but a genuine friend who respected the journey I had been on. "Levi, you need to know what happened after Marcus was arrested," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Apparently, in jail, he tried to intimidate other inmates the same way he did at home. It didn't go well. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say that men who abuse women aren't particularly popular in prison." Marcus quickly learned that outside the home, without his father's protection, he was just another coward who needed constant protection. The irony was poetic. Marcus, who had spent years building his reputation by intimidating vulnerable people, now lived in constant fear of being intimidated himself. My father tried to call me a few times during the first few months after the move. Voice messages that started as pleas for forgiveness evolved into defensive explanations about how he didn't know things had gotten so far, and finally turned into bitter accusations about how I had destroyed the family. I never returned the calls. The truth was crystal clear: when you consistently choose to protect an abuser over the victim, you become complicit in the abuse. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, especially when they were burned by those who should have been the first to protect me. The last message I received from him was particularly revealing. "Levi, you've become a bitter and vengeful person. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've done to this family." When I heard that, I smiled for the first time in months. My mother had died defending the vulnerable, working as a social worker until her last days. If she could see what I had become, someone who fights for justice and protects victims, she would be proud. Emma Rodriguez came to visit me on a sunny Thursday afternoon. She had enrolled in college and was studying psychology with a focus on trauma and recovery. She planned to work with other survivors of abuse when she graduated. "Levi, I wanted to thank you for making it possible for me to find my voice," she said, sitting in the same room where Marcus had threatened me just a few months earlier. "You didn't just help me report him. You showed me that justice really can exist. You always had your voice, Emma. I just helped create a safe space for it to be heard." She smiled, a genuine smile that contrasted sharply with the fear I had seen in her eyes when she was with Marcus. He used to say that no one would believe me, that I was too young, too inexperienced, that his word was worth more than mine because he was older, more established. And now I know that the truth always finds a way. Especially when there are people willing to fight for it, even when they're fighting for strangers. 3 weeks ago, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter on prison paper, the handwriting familiar but visibly altered by anger. "Levi, you destroyed my life because of an accident. A single moment of anger that any normal person would have forgotten. I hope you're happy living alone in that house, because you alienated your entire family because of your drama. No one will ever forgive you for what you did." There was no signature, but I immediately recognized Marcus's handwriting. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a folder with all the other evidence. Not as a war trophy, but as a reminder of the importance of documenting the truth. Marcus still didn't understand. To him, breaking my nose had been an accident, a moment of anger that I should have gotten over. He genuinely believed that I had destroyed his life over a minor incident, unable to recognize the systematic pattern of abuse that he represented. Last week, Danny called me with updates on my father. "Levi, your father is living in a trailer park across town. He lost his job at the factory after the story spread among his co-workers. Apparently, no one wanted to work with someone who had systematically covered up for an abuser. How is he doing financially? Struggling. Without the house as collateral, he can't get credit. And without positive references from his last job, he's having a hard time finding new work. I hear he's doing odd carpentry jobs when he can. And emotionally? Bitter. Angry. He tells anyone who will listen that you're an ungrateful son who destroyed the family out of revenge. But Levi," Danny paused. "People aren't buying his story. When you explain that a father chose to protect the abuser over the victim, his narrative quickly falls apart." I hung up the phone and went back to my studies. My father had made his choices decades ago. Now he was living with the natural consequences of those decisions. The law firm where I work as a paralegal specializes in domestic violence cases because of my experience. Dr. Patterson offered me a permanent position, and together we help other victims navigate the legal system with dignity and strength. This morning, as I got ready for another day representing survivors, I looked in the bathroom mirror. The same mirror where I had seen my broken and swollen nose 8 months ago. The scar was still there, a thin line across the bridge of my nose. But instead of reminding me of humiliation, it reminded me of transformation. It wasn't a mark of victimization, but a symbol of resilience. Marcus thought breaking my nose would break me. My father thought laughing at my pain would silence me forever. They were both fundamentally wrong. The pain didn't destroy me. It forged me into something stronger and more determined. The injustice didn't defeat me. It taught me to fight for justice with precision and purpose. And the devastating feeling of being alone against a family that was supposed to protect me didn't isolate me. It showed me exactly who I really was when all the social masks fell away and only the truth remained. Yesterday, I received a call from a 19-year-old woman whose boyfriend had broken 2 of her fingers in an argument. Her family was pressuring her not to file a police report because it would ruin his future in engineering. When I finished explaining her legal rights and the resources available to her, she said something that made me smile. "Thank you for showing me that I deserve justice, even when the people who are supposed to protect me say otherwise." If you've made it this far on this journey of resilience and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of people who refuse to accept injustice and turn their pain into power. Stories that prove that the truth always prevails, even when it seems impossible. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how many times they try to break us, silence us, or convince us that we deserve less than justice. What really matters is how we choose to rebuild ourselves and what we do with the strength we find in the process. When I look in the mirror today, I no longer see the helpless victim of a broken nose at the hands of a violent cousin protected by an accomplice father. I see a survivor who has learned that true strength does not come from never falling, but from always getting up with more wisdom, more compassion, and more determination. Marcus broke my nose in an afternoon of uncontrolled rage. But I broke the cycle of violence that had corrupted our family for generations. And when other victims come to me looking for hope, I can look them straight in the eye and say with absolute certainty, justice exists. And you deserve every drop of it. That is the only victory that really matters.